and Foreign Affairs of France and Vice Department on the issues of new challenges and threats of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation and Vice Chair of the Committee. Finally, following the fourth segment, I will resume my role as moderator for the intervention sessions. We will then proceed with the closing session. Before giving the floor to our speakers this morning, I would invite all of us to please stand and to commemorate the victims of terrorism, their families, and survivors of terrorism by a minute of silence. I thank you all for joining us in the commemoration to the victims of terrorism. We will now watch a short video commemorating the victims of terrorism, including the victims of the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks.
Indian city of Mumbai endured 4 days of terror at the hands of 10 gunmen.
Fire coming out of the top of the dome of the old Taj Hotel and a huge plume of smoke. Just some time back, we've heard some shots being fired here.
26/11/2008 की दिन मैं मेरे फैमिली के साथ, मेरे पापा, मेरे भाई और मैं, हम तीनों पुणे जाने के लिए बैंड्रा से सीएसटी गए थे। हम भागने की कोशिश की, वैसे कसाब की गोलियां के मेरे राइट पैर में लगी। के चेहरे पे एक मुस्कुराहट है, ऐसा लग रहा है उसे हम लोगों को मार के खुशी मिल रही है।
ये इंसिडेंट हुआ था जब कॉलेज की हम फ्रेंड्स सब लियोपोल्ड कैफे गए थे। हमें एक बड़ा सा धमाका ऐसे सुनाई दिया, तो हम बहुत डर गए क्योंकि हमें वो गोलियां दिख नहीं रही थी, पर दीवार पे वो लग रही थी, तो वो आवाज आ रहा था।
After killing 11 people at Cafe Leopold, Abu Shoaib and Abu Umar walked to the Taj Hotel.
I was terrified and you could hear grenades being thrown. I went on to the 5th and 6th floors and everything was shattered. It was burnt down.
We were made to stand in a line and we were shot point blank. Unfortunately, the 2 guests didn't make it.
There's a corridor. I was at one end and the terrorist was on the other end. So he looked at me, started shooting. He threw a hand grenade on me. Behind me, just 3 feet distance. I jumped, screamed and I jumped. And I knew that point of time I'm going to be dead.
Mumbai was facing an unprecedented attack. Hearing reports of shooting at Kama Hospital, they got into a call-list with 3 constables heading for the Kama Hospital back gate.
तो डॉक्टर ने बोला कि पेशेंट को अभी डिलीवरी मतलब होने वाली है, उसको लेबर रूम में शिफ्ट करो। जो आवाज आ रहा था ग्रेनाइट का, गन का, सब वही टाइम पे गोलीबार बहुत जोर जोर से आवाज है, वही टाइम पेशेंट की डिलीवरी हो गई।
They wanted anyone with British or American passports. Say anyone who had a British or American passport, they wanted to know. So I guess they were after foreigners, yeah.
First thing was bomb. They put a bomb. And not only one, it was around 2-3 bombs. And we were in the kitchen, me and one more helper. I was hiding in the storeroom and we were there up till 11:15 next morning. They didn't allow me to go anywhere. They just surrounded me like I was in a cage. And my baby, he started screaming looking at all that.
At that time in the hotel lobby, there must have been about 30 or so people. I saw, I would say, 10, 12 people fall to the ground whilst I was still there. I think about 4, maybe 5 of us actually made it out of that lobby area. And I was just lucky enough to be able to make it into that.
She's perhaps one of the worst sufferers of the carnage.
Because I refuse to leave the memory of them lying under that table.
Thank you. I will now make a statement in my capacity as chair on behalf of the Counter-Terrorism Committee. Excellencies, distinguished participants, it is my honor to participate in today's opening session of the special meeting of the Counter-Terrorism Committee in my capacity as chair of the Counter-Terrorism Committee of the Security Council. On behalf of the Counter-Terrorism Committee, allow me to thank the Government of India for its generosity in hosting the committee and organizing this very important and topical meeting to discuss the latest developments in emerging technologies, their potential use for terrorist purposes, and how these technologies could be used to counter terrorism and violent extremism conducive to terrorism. Having this event as a special meeting of the CTC reflects the urgency assigned by the committee to this issue. The committee looks forward to having an informative discussion on the varied ways in which the current terrorist landscape is being impacted by evolving technologies and the creative ways to use such technologies for security and counter-terrorism purposes while respecting human rights and the rule of law. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, in recent years, we have seen almost limitless potential of new and emerging technologies in multiple domains, starting from public health, border control, law enforcement, transportation, and communication systems. These innovations have fundamentally altered our societies, fueling economic growth and offering the possibility to reduce existing inequalities. However, the challenges are several and they demand our attention and urgent action. The use of new technologies for terrorist purposes is increasing, diversifying, and evolving as varied technologies become cheaper and more readily available. Proliferation in online activities, particularly during the pandemic, has given terrorists the opportunity to spread their toxic narratives, honing their propaganda, particularly targeting youth and children, including through gaming platforms. Social media is being used by terrorist groups to target vulnerable individuals, creating an online echo chamber of hate. Conspiracy theories, misinformation, and disinformation campaigns have been used by terrorists to fuel societal divisions and distrust in governments and state institutions. The malicious use of artificial intelligence also has the potential to create political unrest and social upheaval. Anonymity offered by sophisticated encryption on various messaging apps and platforms is facilitating terrorists to communicate, congregate, recruit, radicalize, raise funds, and plan attacks. Terrorists are also increasingly relying on modern fundraising and payment technologies and anonymous online transactions. We've seen the evidence of virtual assets being used to fundraise for families of foreign terrorist fighters and their affiliates in northeastern Syria. In recent years, commercially available unmanned aerial systems were used by terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda, Daesh, and their affiliates for trafficking of drugs, arms, and launching attacks. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, unprecedented technological progress is consistently breaking down barriers, connecting people, and laying out new possibilities like never before. Several technological innovations have created new prospects and tools for law enforcement, border security, countering terrorism financing, and other areas in counter-terrorism. However, their use is not uniform. We need better collaboration to share big data-driven innovative solutions with states who lack necessary resources. Member states need to be agile, forward-thinking, and introduce comprehensive legislations to address this issue. Upholding human rights in practice and procedures, along with understanding the gendered impacts and biases of new technologies, are crucial. Ongoing dialogue with multi-sectoral partners and sustained state efforts would be required to successfully create a bulwark against use of new technologies for terrorist purposes. This is why our partnerships with the private sector, CTED's Global Research Network, and civil society, some of whom are present here today, are crucial in acquiring the latest evidence-based research, industry updates, and programmatic insights. The outcome document, which will be adopted today at the closing of the session, suggests several key measures and principles we can all endorse. Together, we can harness the promise of emerging technologies for the original purpose it was intended for, to accelerate global progress for the benefit of humankind. Let me conclude by saying that the threat of terrorism is grave and universal and continues to grow in several parts of the world, particularly in several parts of Africa and South Asia. Terrorism in any part of the world is a threat to the peace and security for the whole world. And therefore, it is important we reaffirm that all acts of terrorism are criminal and unjustifiable, regardless of motivation and wherever, whenever, and by whomsoever it is committed. Thank you. I'm now pleased to invite Dr. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister, Government of India, to deliver the keynote address. Sir, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me extend a warm welcome to all of you who have traveled from every corner of the globe for making it convenient to attend the special meeting of the Counter-Terrorism Committee of the UN Security Council. This is the first time that the UN Security Council is holding a meeting in any format in India. That it is doing so when we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of our independence, the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, is especially noteworthy. I thank the members of the committee and the Counter-Terrorism Executive Directorate for their efforts in holding this special meeting in India. I would also like to acknowledge His Excellency Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General, for his remarks that were read out just now by Ambassador. Your presence here in Delhi today for this special meeting of the CTC demonstrates the importance that the UNSC members, member states, and a wide range of stakeholders place on this critical and emerging facet of terrorism. That the Council is holding this special meeting of its Counter-Terrorism Committee in India is also a product of the fact that counter-terrorism has become one of the top priorities during our ongoing tenure in the Security Council. Terrorism remains one of the gravest threats to humanity. The UN Security Council, in the past 2 decades, has evolved an important architecture built primarily around the counter-terrorism sanctions regime to combat this menace. This has been very effective in putting those countries on notice that had turned terrorism into a state-funded enterprise. Despite this, the threat of terrorism is only growing and expanding, particularly in Asia and Africa, as successive reports of the 1267 Sanctions Committee monitoring reports have highlighted. The technological innovations and breakthroughs of the past 2 decades have been transformative in the way the world functions in every respect. These new emerging technologies, from virtual private networks and encrypted messaging services to blockchain and virtual currencies, offer a very promising future for a wide array of economic and social benefits for humankind. However, there is a flip side, especially where terrorism is concerned. These very technologies have also thrown up new challenges for governments and regulatory bodies due to their potential vulnerability for misuse by non-state actors, given the very nature of some of these technologies and the nascent regulatory environment. In recent years, terrorist groups, their ideological fellow travelers, particularly in open and liberal societies, and lone wolf attackers have significantly enhanced their capabilities by gaining access to these technologies. They use technology and money, and most importantly, the ethos of open societies to attack freedom, tolerance, and progress. Internet and social media platforms have turned into potent instruments in the toolkit of terrorists and militant groups for spreading propaganda, radicalization, and conspiracy theories aimed at destabilizing societies. Another add-on to the existing worries for governments around the world is the use of unmanned aerial systems by terrorist groups and organized criminal networks. Being a relatively low-cost option with an increasing ease of accessibility, misuse of these unmanned aerial platforms for nefarious purposes by terrorist groups, such as weapons and explosives delivery and targeted attacks, have become an imminent danger. They are therefore a challenge for security agencies worldwide. The possibilities of using weaponized drones for terrorist purposes against strategic infrastructure and commercial assets call for serious attention by member states. Our own experience of the 2008 Mumbai attacks, and you will all recall the briefing yesterday, our experience showed us how a benign technology of Voice over Internet Protocol, VoIP, could be used for organizing and directing such a barbaric terrorist attack from beyond our borders. More recently, these terrorist groups have been using unmanned aerial platforms such as drones and quadcopters for cross-border trafficking of drugs and arms and for carrying out terrorist attacks. And such risks are not limited to India. In Africa, drones have been used by terrorist groups to monitor movements of security forces and even of UN peacekeepers, making them vulnerable to terrorist attacks. A few months ago, terrorists launched cross-border drone attacks on the UAE and Saudi Arabia, targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure, which led to loss of lives and injuries, including to Indian nationals there. India has strongly condemned these cross-border drone attacks, both in UAE and Saudi Arabia. With this context, we felt an urgency to initiate a focused discussion at this preeminent Security Council organ, the Counter-Terrorism Committee, charged with the purpose of combating terrorism on this evolving threat from misuse of new and emerging technologies. In January last year, while addressing the Security Council on the issue of terrorism, I had called for the need for the international community to adopt an 8-point action plan, which remains relevant in the context of today's meeting as well. One of the key points I had advocated was for member states to increase funding for UN organs such as the UN Office of Counterterrorism, the UNOCT. We have with us Ambassador Vladimir Voronkov, Under-Secretary General for Counterterrorism. Excellency, I'm happy to announce that India will be making a voluntary contribution of $500,000 in the UN Trust Fund for Counterterrorism this year to augment the efforts of UNOCT in providing capacity building support to member states in preventing and countering the threat of terrorism. I would like to conclude by reaffirming India's commitment to strengthen international efforts to combat terrorism, including combating the use of new and emerging technologies. The Delhi Declaration, which is to be adopted at the special meeting of the CTC, will exemplify the commitment of the international community in dealing with the threat of use of new and emerging technologies for terrorist purposes. We are honored to host this special meeting of the Counterterrorism Committee in India and contributing to international efforts in this regard. I'm confident that today's special meeting will be yet another milestone for this Council to deal with a pressing issue which requires the urgent attention of the international community. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Dr. Jaishankar for his remarks, and I'm pleased to invite His Excellency Mr. Michael Moussa Adamo, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Gabon, to deliver his opening remarks. Excellency, you have the floor.
Pour répandre la terreur, y compris en détournant les nouvelles technologies de l'information, l'intelligence.
Coming home to the world's fastest growing and most deadly terrorist groups. There is no doubt about the consequential impact of this development on our lives, our livelihoods, and our ability to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. Madam Chair, today's meeting therefore offers a unique opportunity to explore effective and comprehensive mechanisms to address the evolving phenomenon of terrorism.